podcast, so I think we can start. Good morning, or whatever time of day it is for you, and welcome to Philosophy Live. I'm Graham Blackbourn from the Scottish branch of the School of Philosophy and Economic Science in Edinburgh. Thank you for joining me. There was an extraordinary flowering in later medieval Europe of what became known as Christian mysticism. I've long been slightly amused by the origin of this mystical tradition in a case of mistaken identity. The ancient treatises on which much of it was based, notably mystical theology and celestial hierarchies, were once thought to have been written by Dionysius, a 1st century convert of St. Paul. So great was Dionysius' influence that the renowned medieval scholar Thomas Aquinas is reported to have quoted him 1,700 times in his writings, and he became known to the church as Saint Denis. But it was suspected for a long time, and is now certain that the author was not a 1st century Christian convert, but a Christian of perhaps the 6th century, whose theology was firmly based on Neoplatonic philosophy. Put simply, the aim of the mystical tradition, both within Neoplatonism and Christianity, is to unite with the one God, who is beyond all positive description and can be reached only by leaving behind all that is not the one God, and entering, in the phrase of a well-known but anonymous 14th century Christian work, the cloud of unknowing. The mystics of this period were certainly devout Christians, but in keeping with our title of Philosophy Live, I'd like to concentrate on the philosophical basis of their faith. And in particular, I'd like to look at one of the later mystics of this period, Teresa of Avila. It's perhaps worth noting in passing how many, perhaps the majority of the better-known Christian mystics at this time were women, in a period when men were overwhelmingly prominent in most areas of life. Teresa, I won't risk mispronouncing her long original Spanish name, was born to a wealthy family, either in or near the Spanish city of Avila, northwest of Madrid, in 1515. Her paternal grandfather had been Jewish, but he, in common with other Jews of the time in Spain, was forced to convert to Christianity. The alternative was to emigrate, and Teresa was given a Christian education in an Augustinian nun school. She was persuaded by her family to take up a religious vocation, and she entered a rather easygoing Carmelite monastery. However, she was drawn to reading about, and later practicing, contemplative prayer and various mystical practices, and she was also influenced by the writings of St. Augustine, recording that she was very fond of Augustine, for he was a sinner too. Gradually, Teresa became disenchanted with the rather lax religious practices of her convent, and despite some opposition, she was permitted to establish a new reformed Carmelite monastery with a stricter rule, more in line with earlier monastic practices. In due course, she established a number of other convents throughout Spain, and she also set up religious houses for men, assisted amongst others by the Carmelite friar John of the Cross, who was also to become a prominent Christian mystic. Over a period of 20 years, she founded 17 convents and a similar number of monasteries. Here's a painting of Teresa, aged 61, by Rubens, a copy of an original painting, and therefore probably a good likeness. To me, there's something in her face both of kindness and of a certain doggedness, which no doubt she would have needed in order to counteract various forces which sought to prevent her reforming mission, including the Inquisition. Teresa wrote a number of books, including an autobiography from which we know a lot about her life. However, she is especially well known for two works. Firstly, The Way of Perfection, aimed at teaching her fellow nuns how to advance spiritually through prayer. It was based on her own experiences and described 4 stages, which she called meditation, quiet, repose of the soul, and perfect union with God. In her second book, Interior Castle, again based on her own experiences, Teresa described the soul as a castle-shaped diamond with 7 dwelling places, representing steps on the path to God. It was perhaps through St. Augustine that Teresa understood the importance of searching into her own self to discover ultimate truths. In his Confessions, Augustine had written how it was necessary, as he put it, to return to my own self, continuing that he entered into the depths of my soul, and with the eye of my soul, such as it was, I saw the light that never changes, casting its rays over my mind. So in turn, Teresa saw the journey through the dwelling places of her interior castle as one of self-discovery, urging the nuns she was writing for to strive to make improvement in self-knowledge. To her, self-knowledge and knowledge of God are closely related. She wrote, "Let's strive to make more progress in self-knowledge. We shall never completely know ourselves if we don't strive to know God. And it is foolish to think that we will enter heaven without entering into ourselves, coming to know ourselves." As I mentioned, the mystical path, both for the Neoplatonists and the Christians who followed Dionysius' guidance, involved approaching ultimate truths, not by following some religious or philosophical creed or formulation of that truth, but by examining one's mind and rejecting all untrue, all habitual ideas, which we become accustomed to. Examples Teresa gives of such unhelpful ideas, which she found influenced her own thinking and behaviour, included the idea that it's important what people think about you, or that one's physical possessions are valuable. Teresa argued that we need to set aside such beliefs, because they create, as she said, great misery within us, and that by carrying on in this way like brute beasts, we remain blighted souls who will never attain understanding. She emphasised that this is not just some doctrinal theory, but something she had found from her own experience to be true. Unless we practice this, according to Teresa, neither security nor peace will be found, while if we take the right road from the beginning, through practicing the meditative exercises she describes in her interior castle, and re-evaluating our beliefs, we will eventually discover the truths we seek. Teresa died aged 67 in 1582. She had become well known during her lifetime, and her teachings remained influential. It's thought probable that they greatly influenced the widely adopted program of education developed by the Jesuits, the Ratio Studiorum, instituted in 1599. Indeed, it's been suggested that René Descartes, the so-called father of modern philosophy, who was born 14 years after Teresa died, and who attended a Jesuit school, may have based his philosophical methodology, as set out in his tellingly entitled Meditations, on Teresa's thinking. In his work, Descartes questioned all his existing beliefs, and concluded that all he could know for sure was his own self. If Descartes was following her, then Teresa of Avila should perhaps be known as the mother of modern philosophy. Rather a surprise for anyone who thinks of her as having been a cloistered nun dabbling in otherworldly mysticism. As we've heard, Teresa's so-called mystical path, originating in Neoplatonism and informed by her own experience, is not specifically Christian, and indeed closely comparable spiritual teachings occur in philosophical and religious traditions worldwide. So, are there any immediate practical lessons we can learn from her? Well, firstly, I'm sure Teresa would say If we already engage in meditative or contemplative practices, keep up the good work. But furthermore, at any moment we can undertake a little self-examination, seeing if we're indulging or acting from some false idea. Even something as simple as, I'm not up to this task, or just, I'm angry or fed up. The kind of thinking which Teresa found leads to great misery. By setting aside such thinking and devoting ourselves to whatever is in front of us, we may discover that life becomes just a little less complicated, and indeed happier, both for ourselves and for those around us. So here's how philosophy might help us today. And thank you. Philosophy Live will be back next week, when we hope to see you for a new philosophical gem. Thanks again. Have a good day and enjoy your weekend.